From Heart of Illinois ABC, Kyle Beachy, Janice Rebholz, Chief Meteorologist Brian Walder, and Sports Director J.D. Rachi. This is Heart of Illinois ABC News at 5:30.
We begin with that developing story out of Lewistown with 4 Fulton County jail inmates escaping overnight. Thank you for joining us. I'm Paige Blanzy, filling in for Kyle. One of those inmates, Eugene Rotz, has been captured in the Peoria area.
Rotz has been captured roughly an hour ago in the city of Peoria. Peoria City, Peoria County, United States Marshals Task Force, all were involved in the apprehension of Mr. Rotz.
This as multiple agencies are still searching for 3 other inmates who escaped last night. We start with Alex Gall, who's live at the Fulton County Jail in Lewistown with what happened and where we are now. Alex?
Paige, a massive manhunt is underway as we speak, and authorities are still searching for those 4 men. But tonight we're learning about how they made their escape and who they are.
You know, the contingency plan is to get out there and get them caught.
Sheriff Jeff Standard says a dozen law enforcement agencies are still searching for these 4 men. 34-year-old Jesse Davis, 26-year-old Corey Villalobos, 36-year-old Zachary Hart, and 22-year-old Eugene Rotz escaped the Fulton County Jail overnight. The sheriff says they exploited a deficiency at the jail and ran off under the cover of darkness. Standard would not say what that deficiency was, but says he is committed to their capture.
They'll be located, they'll be punished for what they've done, and these are all criminals. They all know exactly what they're doing. They were all looking at multiple years behind bars, and this is just going to add to that.
All 4 men were in custody for various drug and gun-related charges. One of the men, Eugene Rotz, was sentenced to 7 years in prison 2 months ago and was awaiting transfer to the Illinois Department of Corrections.
You don't plan for this to happen. When it was discovered, we took the appropriate actions.
Standard says they believe the 4 inmates are still on foot. Thursday morning, police were seen using a drone, plane, and a helicopter in their search of the Farmington area. They've also searched and driven through cornfields. Sightings have been reported of these 4 men all across the community and all across Fulton County. Police saying if you do see any of them, to call them or 911. We're live in Lewistown. I'm Alex Gall, Heart of Illinois, ABC.
Thanks, Alex. Back in Lewistown, last night's escape has left a very shaken community here in its wake. Darnisha Mitchell is live in Farmington, where she spoke with residents who came face to face with the inmates. Darnisha?
Paige, I spoke with a neighbor in Farmington, and they tell me one of the inmates approached them in their front yard. The person, who doesn't want to be identified, says they were in their yard around 6 a.m. when one of the escaped inmates, Jesse Davis, approached them and offered money in exchange for a ride.
Being in a small town, you kind of know everybody and who's kind of out of place, so we knew right off that he wasn't even right to be here, let alone in my yard. It's scary. It's very scary.
Another person said he thought he saw one of the escapees running down the street without a shirt late last night. He says that inmate is likely long gone now. News of the escape has shocked the Lewistown community. One resident described the escape as reckless, saying he's concerned for the community's safety.
Holy cow, I was worried about, everybody around here because they could be in somebody's house or something.
Police are focusing their search on Lewistown, Farmington, and the surrounding areas. Now the sheriff is also asking neighbors to lock up their homes and vehicles and to not approach any of these men, as they are considered armed and dangerous. He also asks his neighbors to contact 911 or the Fulton County Sheriff if they see any of the remaining inmates. We will continue to follow the latest developments in this story. Live in Farmington, I'm Darnisha Mitchell, Heart of Illinois, ABC. Paige, back to you.
Thanks, Darnisha. A crash in Logan County last night killed 3 Washington teens and 1 adult. Illinois State Police say the crash happened around 10 on I-55 just north of Lincoln. That's mile marker 122. Police say 5 people were in a minivan heading northbound when the driver lost control in heavy rain. That's when it drove across the median and was hit by a semi heading southbound. The crash killed the driver of the minivan, a 47-year-old man, and 3 of its passengers, a 16-year-old girl, a 17-year-old girl, and a 17-year-old boy. A 13-year-old girl was also taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The names of the people who died have not yet been released. A letter went out to Washington Community High School families earlier today. It says 3 Washington High School students and a family member of a school employee died in a car accident. The district is providing counseling tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Kyle Freeman says they have 5 counselors available on call to talk to students. The suspect in yesterday's burglary of a gun store in downtown Peoria is now in custody. 29-year-old Corey Brooks is currently being held at the Peoria County Jail on federal hold pending charges. According to a news release, Peoria police officers responded to Pinnacle Gun and Ammo early Wednesday morning for an intrusion alarm. Multiple guns were stolen from the store. Authorities searched the area and found 2 of the stolen firearms. During the investigation, PPD officers made a traffic stop and saw a man who was trying to hide in the back of the car. That turned out to be Brooks. He was then taken into custody. This is still under investigation, and investigators are still trying to find other stolen firearms. The prosecution has rested in the Leslie Jett murder trial. Now the defense is trying to prove that 4-year-old Tate Thurman's injuries were not the result of abuse, but rather of roughhousing with his older brother. Andy Weber is live at the courthouse. Andy?
Paige, we once again heard from East Peoria Detective Dale Orr in a body camera recording from 2020. Orr can be heard saying it was possible that Tate Thurman's fatal injuries were caused by the boy wrestling with his 7-year-old brother.
There's a table in the middle of the bedroom upstairs where the scoreboard is, and the chair is tipped over. I wonder if that 7-year-old, when they were getting dressed or something, didn't jump off or something onto Tate.
That's a recording of a phone conversation Orr had with his supervisor while at the house in East Peoria where Tate Thurman had been found unresponsive. Tate had been brought to the hospital only a few hours earlier. To Orr, the house seemed normal, full of toys and kids' clothes. The only thing that stood out was all the WWE gear.
Out of everything I've seen in this house so far, that is the only thing that I can really pick up on. It's a lived-in house, but it's not what you necessarily expect to find in a house full of abuse.
However, prosecutor Sarah Schreier pointed out at the time of the phone call, the detective had not seen Tate's injuries.
You hadn't spoken to the doctors?
No.
To any of them, correct?
Correct.
You had not received any information about the rate of bleeding that the doctors observed in Tate, correct?
That's correct.
Also during testimony, Jeremy Thurman, Tate's father, took the stand once again. Defense attorney Michael Brandt asked Jeremy about he and Tate's older brother's shared love for wrestling. Brandt worked to show that the 7-year-old was exposed to a lot of different wrestling moves. Jeremy Thurman was adamant that his 7-year-old knew dangerous moves should only be done by the professionals. And Paige, you mentioned that the defense is trying to prove that wrestling caused those injuries. They're not trying to prove anything. They're just trying to suggest or help sow doubt against the prosecution's arguments. But we'll hear more from the defense's witnesses tomorrow. We're also expecting to hear a 911 call made by Leslie Jett when Tate Thurman became unresponsive in February of 2020. Reporting live in Pekin, I'm Andy Weber, Heart of Illinois, ABC. Back to you.
Thanks, Andy. Now weather with meteorologist Brian Walder.
A cloudy and cool day today. Temperatures running almost 10 degrees below average for what we typically see this time of year. And kind of cool for early July. And there's a live look at downtown Peoria. You see some of the gray skies there at the top of your screen. Clouds have been with us all day long, and they'll stay with us for at least a few more hours. We might see a little bit of clearing overnight tonight, especially late and into early tomorrow morning. Here's our temperatures. Again, this is not typical for 5 o'clock in July. Even some 60s on the map up there by Interstate 80. Otherwise, most of us in the low to mid 70s. But we're a lot cooler than yesterday in sunspots, upward of 10 to 15 degrees lower. We're in the low 60s tonight. All eyes on tomorrow evening. Maybe some stronger severe storms in the forecast. We'll details on that in a few minutes.
Thanks, Brian. Officials have decided to not have spectators at the Tokyo Olympics, now just a few weeks away. Meanwhile, Japanese officials announcing new measures to keep COVID-19 from spreading as the games move forward. ABC's James Longman reports from London.
The Olympic Games will be held under a state of emergency. That was the extraordinary decision Japan's Prime Minister announced today. He said bars, restaurants and karaoke parlours that serve alcohol will be made to close. He said it was to prevent the future spread of the virus. This is all due to go into effect Monday, and it'll last through the Games to August 22nd. Now, cases there do remain relatively low compared to most other countries, but they are now rising. And crucially, and this is really the key here, 15% of the Japanese population has received a vaccine, so it's still very far behind. The authorities there have been under pressure for months from a majority of the population who don't want the Games to go ahead. This is as the Delta variant surges around the world. The World Health Organization has said it's now the dominant strain in 92 countries. Experts underline that the vaccines do work against this strain, which is why they say it's so important for countries across Africa, Asia and South America. They're all still very far behind on their vaccine rollouts. The people there get their shots as soon as possible. James Longman, ABC News in London.
Coming up next, St. Jude Runs is celebrating its 40th anniversary. How their years of fundraising has inspired the community to give back.
And I want to pay attention to the weekend forecast. We have some wet weather to talk about and some pretty decent rainfall totals on the way. Details on that, plus look ahead to maybe some severe weather in the forecast tomorrow evening. Your 10-day forecast is next.